Okay, let's dive into this. Today's explainer is going to take us back in time to deconstruct a famous and honestly highly suspenseful narrative from 1st century Capernaum. It's a story of absolute desperation, an unbreakable crowd, a literally destroyed roof, and a massive plot twist. We're going to analytically break down the incredible historical and literary narrative of the healing of the paralyzed man. So, I really want you to think about this for a second. What would you do if a literal wall, or, in this case, an entire house packed to the brim with people, stood between your best friend and the only person who can actually help them? Like, how far would you go to break through? That right there is the intense physical stake that kicks off the narrative we're about to unpack.
Section 1. The Unbreakable Crowd.
All right, let's set the stage and establish the intense spatial constraints of our setting. The source material tells us that after a few days away, Jesus returns to Capernaum and is staying in a house. Well, word gets out and a massive crowd gathers. The text specifically notes that the house became completely full, with absolutely no space left for anyone else to enter. Imagine the claustrophobia for a minute. A space so packed that people are standing inside every single room, shoulder to shoulder. They're crowding the doorway and spilling all the way out into the street. Jesus is inside teaching, but there is absolutely zero physical way in or out of that building.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just a regular crowd of locals. There was a highly specific VIP audience present, the Pharisees and teachers of the law. Basically, these guys were the theological watchdogs of the era, and they had traveled from villages all over Galilee and Judea, and even made the trek from the capital, Jerusalem. They're sitting right there in the middle of it all, carefully listening and analyzing his every single move, which, as you can imagine, instantly cranks up the tension in that already suffocating room.
Section 2. Through the Roof.
And this brilliantly illustrates the incredibly drastic actions taken by 4 men who have just arrived carrying their paralyzed friend on a mat. It's a visual progression of absolute desperation and a total refusal to give up. First, they arrive carrying their friend. Second, they hit that massive crowd, try the door, and realize, nope, it's totally blocked. Third, they carry this grown man up the outside stairway of the house right to the flat roof. And fourth, they carefully start removing part of the roof. Now, a quick historical fact for you. Typical houses in this era had flat roofs made of wooden beams covered with branches and packed mud. So digging through it, entirely possible, but incredibly, incredibly messy.
I want to bring this historical setting to life for just a second. Put yourself in that room. Imagine being in that stuffy, packed space, listening to the teaching, when suddenly, pieces of clay and dust begin falling right on your head. The people inside look upward in complete surprise as a large hole literally opens up in the ceiling right above them. The narrative describes the 4 men up top using ropes to slowly lower their paralyzed friend on his mat right down into the middle of the crowded room.
Section 3. The Ultimate Plot Twist. So the man is lowered down. He lands directly in front of Jesus, and the entire room goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone is waiting for the obvious physical healing. But instead, Jesus looks at the man, acknowledges the undeniable faith of those 4 friends, and drops a completely unexpected bombshell. He says, "Son, take courage. Your sins are forgiven." Talk about a shocking pivot. In the ancient Jewish world, physical ailments were frequently viewed as direct punishments for sin. So by addressing the man's spiritual state first, rather than his physical paralysis, Jesus is completely upending everyone's expectations. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between what is spoken out loud and what is being thought in secret. On one side, we have Jesus publicly declaring, "Your sins are forgiven." On the other side, those theological watchdogs, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, they are immediately reacting, but silently, reasoning in their hearts. They are sitting there thinking, why does this man speak like this? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins except God alone? They don't say a single word out loud, but their unspoken outrage is palpable. But the text shows Jesus knowing exactly what they are thinking. He turns to them, calls out their secret thoughts, and poses this absolutely brilliant rhetorical challenge. Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk. Let's just pause for a second and let that sink in. The religious leaders remain completely silent. It's a theological trap they just can't escape. Because think about it, saying your sins are forgiven is easy, right? It can't be physically proven. But saying get up and walk, that requires visible, immediate proof of divine power.
Section 4. Authority to heal.
Jesus doesn't just leave that question hanging in the air. He uses this precise moment in the narrative to declare his authority. Addressing the silent room, he says, "But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Then he turns directly back to the paralyzed man to resolve that massive physical tension in the room. With absolute command, he says, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home."
According to the narrative, here is the miraculous resolution. Immediately, strength entered the man's body. Right in front of everyone watching, he moves his arms and legs. He slowly sits up, he stands to his feet, and he actually lifts up the very mat he had been paralyzed on just minutes before. And the text describes that unbreakable crowd suddenly finding a way to part and move aside as the man walks right through them. He leaves the house carrying his own mat, loudly praising and glorifying God.
The reaction is explosive. Everyone in the house is completely amazed. Up on the roof, the narrative implies the absolute joy of those four friends whose faith brought their buddy to this exact moment. Down below, the crowd is praising God, declaring, "We have never seen anything like this. We have seen extraordinary things today."
So, the crucial point is, what do we actually learn from deconstructing this historical event? Let's synthesize the takeaways from our source text. First, the narrative brilliantly uses the physical healing as a tangible validation of a much larger spiritual claim. Jesus' dual authority to both heal the body and forgive sins. Second, it demonstrates the sheer power of persistent faith. And third, it highlights the beauty of faithful friendship. I mean, the kind of friendship that simply refuses to allow any physical or societal obstacle to prevent someone they care about from reaching the help they desperately need.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought for you to take away. What obstacles are you currently allowing to block your path? And perhaps even more importantly, who are the friends in your life willing to literally break through the roof for you? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.